Hello, my HS 100 students. This is for your Professor Donald Earl Collins. We are post small group questions writing assignments. Yay! I don't have to grade these again for the rest of the semester. I will definitely make adaptations to the way I do this the next time I teach this course, assuming that there is a next time I teach this course. Um, so so there's that. Yay. I want to talk to you very briefly about two issues, not related to what we're doing in class this week, but is related to what we're doing this semester. One is why your grade, your how your grades came out, why they came out the way they came out on your assignment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And two, the upcoming assignment that is the rest of the semester, your freestyle artifact um, project, whether it's an individual project or group project of some sort, where you're putting together something that will be presented via video, multimedia presentation, video presentation of some sort. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. As far as the grading's concerned, all of you got a curve. Depending on which section of 100 you're in, your curve might be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, but everyone got a curve. Why? Because between the two sections now, four groups out of 18 got an A, right? I thought it would be more. There probably should have been a few more, but folks weren't doing all their due diligence and doing their revisions, right? Folks that should have gotten probably an A minus or an A didn't do the revisions the way they should have done them. Or they submitted, they had a formatting issue, or more than likely their biggest issue was, putting down a works cited page and not actually citing any sources in the body paragraphs of your assignment. That's not citing. Just because a website has a works cited at the end of the web page doesn't mean they've actually cited anything, right? Sometimes they number stuff to try to show that they've cited a source, like they're trying to make the bibliography also be a set of citations at the same time. That might work for a web page. That does not work for any course, my course, anybody else's course, unless they specify that this is the way they want things, which I did not. So you needed to have endnotes, or at the end of your set of questions and responses, or you needed to have footnotes, per page, or you needed to have in-text citations within each paragraph where you were citing sources. Most of you either didn't cite sources at all or cited very few of the sources you actually listed, which actually technically is a small form of plagiarism. You can't list sources that you don't cite. You're appropriating them to make your assignment look better. So no, there were spelling grammar errors, or people didn't check their spelling. One group handed in their stuff and only put down first names, things like that. The capital B in black wasn't consistently capitalized. One of you used colored people instead of talking about black people, which, by the way, in the post 1960s era is considered sort of a slur. So try not to do those kinds of things, right? Now, the truth of the matter is that one of y'all complained, a couple of weeks ago that we don't know this subject, right? We don't know anything about Black history, right? And to be honest with you, that's a bit of a cop out. Not only is it a cop out, it sort of just suggests this: anything that doesn't deal specifically with U.S., i.e., mainstream, i.e., white history, is so foreign to us that we can't possibly do an assignment on it that makes any sense. I have problems with that, right? I'm going to talk to you more about this tomorrow in specific, because I want to show you something in terms of how I hope some of you might have done your assignment. At least one way of doing it that actually might have involved, stuff that I said you could use that I didn't think would be a good idea for you to use, but it might be useful for you to try it out anyway, kind of thing, right? So, but the bottom line is, too many of you didn't think about in real expansive ways questions that haven't been addressed. Some of you managed to get there with your second drafts, which is why your grades, even before the curve, might have been an A, or at least a higher B, like an 86 or an 87, something like that, right? That would have been that. And so that for those groups, you're fine. That anyone with an 86 or higher did pretty well, right? Because they met the criteria of at least 4 questions with, somewhere near three, four, half, explanations or full explanations of why the question was important and what, purpose it would serve, why does it matter, what new information could be learned, what new ways of thinking about old information could be gleaned from doing things that way, kind of thing. So there's that. But for the rest of you, it was as if you're like, I don't want to do the readings to find out if there are any holes. I don't want to rethink about all the, stuff that we watch because I didn't take any notes while we were watching anything. I don't want to work with other people in my group because I think the other people in my group suck. So I'm just going to do my own thing, even though your stuff might probably suck as well. All of those kinds of things were factors of why your grades would have stayed below an 86 or an 85, or even in a couple of cases below an 80. Right. So, that those are the kinds of things I had to deal with. But I'll say this as far as, using your imagination. There's a lot that wasn't covered. No one talked about the underground economy as if everybody just worked regular jobs and that was it. A lot of vices out there, especially during the period known as Prohibition between 1920 and 1933. No one brought that up, right? Not a single person. I might have mentioned it in passing, but some of your readings actually mention it, so I don't understand why it wasn't going to come up. Um, you know, all of you talked about oral history versus written history, right? But music's a form of oral history, right? No one talked about it in that context. Almost no one mentioned that, right? People talked about music. Some people brought up jazz. Some brought up the blues. People brought up the blues, but it was stuff that we kind of covered already. So it was harder for you to bring up those kinds of things, right? Only one of you did a comparison between the plight of white ethnic immigrants in the U.S. at the beginning of the 20th century, what black immigrants faced, those kinds of things. No one talked about the kinds of businesses black folk would have built, to accommodate black communities during this time period, and maybe one question about it altogether, right? Those kinds of things, right? Um, I mean, I could keep going, but there was just a lot that just didn't get covered because people were just so focused on, well, I want to make sure I please the professor rather than, hey, what do you think? I'm asking you what you think about these kinds of things, what things didn't get covered, right? And there's a lot under the topics that didn't get covered, right? you know, and that's why your grades are the way they were. So again, we'll talk about this more in class on Tuesday, but I wanted to give you just some sense of that in terms of what my thinking is around it. So the second part is you do have a new assignment. You have a proposal that's due this week. I plan on putting up sample proposals hopefully no later than Wednesday. I'm hoping to do it today, actually, but no later than the middle of the week so that you have them so you can use them. Because I've given this assignment in various sorts of ways, both at Loyola and at AU and in my previous job at University of Maryland Global Campus, where it's a freestyle artifact project, very versions of this. What you are doing at the very least, in the very minimum, is some sort of video recording of a PowerPoint all the way up to doing some multimedia presentation. It might be a podcast. You can make it a podcast, a video podcast. You can do man on the street interviews if you wanted to do that. You can do a virtual tour of a museum if you wanted to do that. You can do any number of things to basically be able to show that you are using an artifact to delve deeper into some aspect of either how historians do their work in general, right? But really within the context of migration. Now, if you looked at the syllabus, and I'll probably put up a version of this and put it under a folder as well, of what I'm asking you to do. You can do anything on migration since 1910, right? So, what I've excluded from there is white ethnic migration from 1870 to 1920 for a simple reason. Most of you probably would have done something on this in K-12. You either read about this, studied this, a project about this, some genealogy project or whatever. And I'm trying to get you to think about other people besides yourselves, right? There's too much of that me, I. kind of stuff where you are just, or even when you say things like mainstream, average American, all that, where all you're thinking about are white people. I'm kind of like, well, I'm trying to teach about black migration. But if you don't want to do black migration, you can do Latinx migration, Puerto Rican migration, Cuban migration. You can do Mexican migration. You can do Afro Caribbean migration. You can do migrant worker migration. You could do migration of Asian Americans, second, third, fourth generation Asian Americans. You can do any number of other things that do not have to involve. You can do white migration from cities to suburbs if you wanted to. That's fine with me. I just don't want you doing the same old Ellis Island crap, tired of it. And it's a cop out. And you think because you know, quote unquote, know the stuff because you've learned a little bit of something about it in K-12, that somehow that this will make it easier for you. It actually makes it harder because if you know this stuff, that means that I've probably seen this stuff 100 times already. What's going to be different about your 101st version of it than anything like that? So I'm telling you specifically, no, you are not doing that time period, and you're not doing earlier time periods because we're starting with 1910. All right, so no. Um, so there's that. The artifact is just that. It can be literally an artifact. It can be a watch. It can be a watch that was made. That somebody who migrated from north to south or north to west or to Seattle or even to Canada, wore on their migration. Could be let's just say, a train ticket. It could be that, right? It can be a song. I've been playing music for you all semester from the time period, from later time periods that deal with migration of one's mind and spirit, or actual migration, people moving from point A to point B to point C, et cetera, et cetera. You can do that. You can do movies. You can do a television show that somehow covers this. You can even do stuff that's outside the time period. I don't mean prior to 1910. Do not do that. I mean prior, like post 1970 stuff. If it's not about reverse migration, but if it's about being at destination kind of stuff, and it harkens back to a group of people who might have moved in the 1940s or in the 19 teens and 20s or whatever, that's fine too. But it's usually something physical or something material in nature. By material, movies, media, that kind of material, right? But it can be an artifact. Do not pick a book unless you plan on covering the book's significance and its impact on people and its legacy, right, over time, right? Because I don't need a book review. Please don't do that, all right? Especially if it's a secondary book like Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns. We are already covered at least parts of it, of several chapters of that, looking at one person's, migration process. So no, I don't want you doing a book unless you plan on talking about that book's significance and not just giving me the book said this and the book said that and the book said the other thing kind of stuff. I don't need you summarizing the book. I need you to talk about its legacy. It's in time and real time impact and its long term legacy. Then I don't want it, and then you shouldn't be doing it. You're supposed to be delving deeper, right, than just the basic stuff. And that's part of the problem with the stuff that you've already done in this class so far, whether it's your first what is and what is in history essays or with your group assignments, is that that you don't want to go beyond the basic. You don't want to think outside the box. You don't want to be creative. You don't want to inspire yourselves, much less have me inspire you. So I'm asking you to do a freestyle assignment where it is I've given you some parameters, but it's open to what you want to do. There's a lot of things you can do, and I'm hoping that you want to do something more than just, an 8-page PowerPoint where you basically review a book and then you tell me in one page why it's significant and why and what its legacy is, and then you end up with a B minus because you didn't do what I asked you to do the way I wanted you to do it. So that's it. Again, this is something I'll talk about on Tuesday and Thursday. So if you have any questions, leave me those for the purpose of this assignment that's due on ultimately December the 3rd. Proposal's due November 5th. So, okay.